feel like we're all good friends now. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you spending your day with us here, and we're really looking forward to a pretty solid conversation. First, we'll give a quick intro to our work. So ISTC is Illinois Science and Technology Coalition. We've been around for nearly 35 years. Next year is our 35th birthday, and we exist across the state of Illinois as a means of measuring, connecting, and advocating for the state's innovation economy. We currently do that across 4 pillars. We have innovation, data, education, and advocacy. Today's a really unique conversation for us because sometimes we get a little compartmentalized, but our University Entrepreneurship Report stretches across all of these topics, so we're looking forward to digging into that. Some of the programmings that are embedded within those 4 pillars are our Venture Engine. Venture Engine is a platform of over 200 pre-seed to Series A startups across the state of Illinois. And we try to connect those startups with corporates, kind of through this platform, almost as a LinkedIn or online dating for startups. And then we complement that with in-person and virtual programming. Think lunch and learns, workshops, pitch showcases, networking dinners, things of that nature. And then on our education side, we have 4 flagship programs. STEM Challenge brings corporates into the classroom to show students new pathways into STEM careers. The 6x3 project is kind of our mini summer version of that, where they really get to play around with their ideas and learn new skills. And then Mentor Matching Engine, everyone in this room make a mental note on this one. It is a virtual platform for experts across the state to virtually mentor students. It is a proprietary platform, safe for them to chat, video chat, whatever it might be, with anyone that is a subject matter expert for research that they're doing or a career that they're interested in. And then teacher externships. We plug our students directly, or our teachers, directly into corporates so that they can see some of the real life experiences that they're trying to coach their students towards. And then our publications, our Director of Marketing and Communications is here, Annie's in the back, and she leads all of our publications, including Spark and Catalyst, which are our 2 newsletters. Spark goes out once a week. Please sign up. Catalyst comes out once a month, and that's where we interview subject matter experts across the state. If you're interested in being one, let us know. And then our Illinois Innovation Index, which is what brings us here today. This Illinois Innovation Index is a tri-part series every year. We have the University Entrepreneurship, which is the topic of today's conversation. Then we have research and development and STEM talent. Each of these are released once a year just to assess the kind of state of the state and how we're doing in terms of innovation. What kind of talent are we producing? What is that talent doing? And what's the research that's leading to that talent being developed? And now we'll go over to our keynote speaker for today. We have John Bosnilik. Did I do it? Please come up and you have a presentation to share with us, and then we'll shift on over to our panel discussion. But thank you all again for being here. Really appreciate it. Now we'll have a seamless transition if you just close your eyes for 10 seconds. Annie, the screen's different than when you showed it to me before.
Okay. Well, I thought I would spend just a bit of time talking about some of the special aspects of innovation here in healthcare at OSF, here at OSF Innovation, and why we have deliberately partnered with universities to bring innovation forward for our patients. I'm an emergency medicine physician by training. I serve as Chief Medical Officer for Innovation and Digital Health here at the healthcare system, OSF Healthcare System. I'm a professor of emergency medicine for the University of Illinois and a professor of engineering. I teach bioeng over in Urbana. That's one of the exciting portions of my life. I live here in Peoria, and I've got a QR code here if you're interested in connecting. A little bit about the problem statement. The OSF healthcare system is a diverse population. It incorporates urban areas and quite rural areas, small critical access hospitals, and all the way up to quaternary care environments across a large catchment area. And the Innovation Center here, the JUMPS Trading Simulation and Education Center, began as a simulation program and has emerged beyond education to enliven discovery through design and development. A lot of human-centered design, but experiential discovery. When we talk about OSF innovation, we often talk about that it's not just the place, because in fact, OSF innovation extends itself into the 16 hospitals of the healthcare system with innovation hubs, and we hope that it is more about culture and mentoring and the discipline and the process, but at times it's about the people that we encounter as well. So we're going to fingers crossed on this guy here. Let's see, let's see if I can swing this. Look at us doing technology.
You're better than me.
All right,
My name's Ashay Patel. I'm a junior at the U of I, studying bioengineering. So the team that I'm on is called the Clinical Immersion Team, and what we do is we go into clinical spaces inside the hospital using a multifaceted team of engineers, medical students, people with medical backgrounds. We look at what are the workarounds and pain points that clinicians are using and are dealing with in their day-to-day practice. We turn these pain points and workarounds into engineering solutions, pass these on to a build team where they actually prototype. And what's really unique about JUMP is that when they prototype this, we have the clinicians right next door. So we can then take these prototypes right to the clinicians and get their feedback right away, iterate, give them another prototype, keep on going until we have a really good product. So as someone who wants to go into medicine, but also has an engineering and management background in their undergrad, I'm really excited to see how if physicians can interface with engineers and business people to really bring an environment of innovation into the hospital. So by bringing the newest frontiers of technology like machine learning and virtual reality into the clinic and into medical education, I'd love to see how I can be of use as a physician to other physicians, to engineers, to business people, to move the whole field forward. So one goal that I have for this summer is to actually make an impact in the hospital and for patients. And as people who care about this, people who work at JUMP, future physicians, future biomedical engineers, that's our goal for our lives and for our careers. But what I think is unique about this internship is that we can come in and actually have a deliverable that's going to make a difference. It's almost a Silicon Valley feeling when we walk through the halls here, and getting that innovative feeling in healthcare and knowing that we're some of the only people in the country that can think like this, that have the resources to turn this into reality, that's what's unique about JUMP, and I think that's why me and all the other interns are here.
So I love his enthusiasm, and for me, this is one of the driving,
when you're in JUMP and
driving forces for my continued satisfaction with our mission set is the engagement to a variety of young people who bring that novice mind to the context of healthcare and to help us to develop. Over the course of JUMP's engagement with academicians and institutions, we've actually sponsored more than 230 now students from colleges and universities, actually beyond Central Illinois. We gather people in from East Coast and West Coast, and they come and commingle with our teams. But it's about this ability to inspire young people and to have them experience healthcare. I'm going to get into that in greater detail and the specialness about what we produce here. But I wanted to give you his point of view. He's actually now an ophthalmology resident at Northwestern. And he's maintained contact with us because at some point he may want to come back to this environment and continue his innovation plan. And OSF has its own particular core features that it's looking forward to from an aspirational standpoint, among which are the expansion of STEAM solutions. And so this engagement, this pipeline of young people gaining experience and understanding how their gifts can be brought into context with healthcare to help others is certainly a key component. As an institution, we're very, very, very interested in greater access and anticipating the needs of patients rather than having them beat our door down, as is the constant model today, where you have to request an appointment. Why aren't we anticipating? Machine learning and other tools that are available to us in data science, we should be more anticipatory, and yet we're not. And in some cases, we've been able to prove that, especially for cancer prevention, that we can do more to anticipate needs, to find the patients who are lost and off track and bring them back into preventative measures that actually lead to lives saved. OSF's agenda can be split along these three horizons, near term, long term, and also along the idea of partnerships or versus internal development. And this is our constant journey, leveraging all of the components. So this center is somewhat unique in that the Simulation Center commingles with data analytics and performance improvement and other disciplines very deliberately. And we leverage the Simulation Center not just to look at the educational context, to promote those themes, but also to make good investments, to de-risk investments, and actually set the course for the inclusion of new technologies that may come from outside. But this is our day-to-day. This is a real picture with permission from our neonatal intensive care unit with a real nurse. And look at this. This is the complex socio-technical system that exists around healthcare providing care to our most vulnerable patients today. This child is in the NICU for good purpose. There are wires and tubes in nearly every orifice here, and our clinicians are engaging with this patient, and it's all quite serious, right? This is not the place, but I'll show you where the place is. Here at JUMP, we can emulate these clinical care environments and use mechanical devices, mannequins, et cetera, and we bring our clinicians into context, not just for the educational purpose, training teams in their discipline to provide resuscitative care or in the use of new instrumentation. We recreate the very complex socio-technical system so that our engineers and designers can design in that space. And this was purpose-built for that work. And so biodesign takes a unique home in this case. And let me share, one of the things I teach our bio-eng students, and I intend to propagate this message. So if you are a bio-eng student or any design student from any background that wants to engage in healthcare, you oftentimes are afforded an opportunity to shadow, right? To look over the shoulder, right? So you can imagine how this happens all over the place. So the problem is that if you're a student or a novice in that space, you're cognitively loaded with all the things that you shouldn't touch or do, right? Like, stand over here, don't touch the blue thing, definitely don't interrupt the surgeon, right? Like, it's all there, right? By bringing this student into simulations like this, they can cognitively unload that stuff, because we train them. We teach them about sterile gown. We teach them about procedures. We show them the workflow before it happens so that they can concentrate on the ideation. They're there to perceive the problems and produce potential solutions, and do so in a disciplined fashion. We give them simulation as a preparatory, and that opens the field. It releases them from those fears and anxieties so they can focus on the work at hand. Now, the other problem is scale. Like, does every innovation center across the country require 168,000 square feet of innovation space like this space? Actually, I would say, I hope not. I have deep gratitude to the philanthropy that built this space and the system that supports it. But I do believe that virtual reality and immersive, augmented, and other tools like this can actually expand and scale our ability to bring those insights to de-risk, but also to create beautiful educational environments that allow for innovation and ideation to prosper. This is Dr. Bramlett, and he is demonstrating one of our virtual reality solutions born here at OSF now in the form of a commercial company called Duvo, which is across several verticals, but it is a platform also to reveal space. We actually use this to orient patients and teams of clinicians to the neonatal intensive care unit, to the OB suite, et cetera. It actually is a team event. And here are teams. This is the classic educational environment for team education, multi-professional teams, nursing, technicians, respiratory therapists around a contrived context of simulation, resuscitation of a child in an emergency department. In the foreground, you see the pediatric crash cart. This is a locked space. So this is very typical in healthcare. Many spaces are sacrosanct, locked, secluded, off the beaten path. Well, this cart is locked for a good purpose. There's medication and life-saving equipment in it, so you don't break the seal until you need it, okay? You leave it locked up, and then when you unlock it, if you were to do so for training, you'd have to reestablish that cart. You'd have to recommission it and lock it back up. So we don't do that. So the need statement was, how do we get beyond that locked space? So we produced an app here from several grants, one of which my wife created. And I think there's a conflict of interest in there somewhere, but I'll let Kip deal with that. But she actually created an augmented reality crash cart for pediatrics. So it allows you to instantiate the cart into any environment. You can be on an airplane, you can be here in this conference room. You can instantiate the cart and you can explore the cart in its context. Okay, contents. You've unlocked the space. And so this is another reveal. This is how simulation and immersion can actually unlock these hidden spaces. And I mentioned de-risking investment. The LifeFlow device seen lower right is a device that was tested in simulation. It was felt to be a good investment. It was then invested upon by our OSF ventures, but it was also integrated into our healthcare system. And the change that required is part of the risk of an investment, because that change is required across every hospital. So we use simulation to help us to get across that actually adoption of a new piece of equipment in resuscitation. And there are many models for this, but we do believe that these teams working together in an agile process with lots of feedback, lots of iteration from the clinical and peri-clinical, this simulated circumstance, allow us to really go deeper and richer. And so it creates a wonderful context for discovery. And to that effect, and because this field is so broad, OSF has very specifically dedicated certain laboratories as lightposts or beacons to partner with academics so that we can move things forward. And we've been richly blessed with philanthropy and with other resources to actually expand our existing relationships with academics through our translational research agreements and our 4 purposeful partners. So the first of which, largest of which, is the University of Illinois, now going back to 2014 with 150 or so projects and spent more than $9 million in $100,000 each projects that develop new intellectual property. The UIC relationship, which is a 5-year commitment with about $2 million, co-mingled to bring clinicians and developers together to solve problems in healthcare. The Bradley University relationship, the investment for health, the co-mingling of $1 million per year for projects that bring and develop new ideas, and the ISU Connected Communities Initiative, which likewise, each leading to the strength of the institution, brought into context with our clinical problems to produce new things. And again, the idea of simulation in the mix here, an integrated simulation center, data analytics and simulation and all these tools of instrumentation allow teams of academics to actually, if they desire it, to move into our space and to observe the space as clinical care is provided and not be at that bedside with that newborn infant, but at least have an ability to observe how work is performed. I've seen many projects come through spaces like this. I'm on a little bit of a soapbox, and I do intend very deliberately to spread the message that academic medical centers across the country have simulation centers today. When I first joined in emergency medicine 2 decades ago, simulation was relatively novel, but simulation now exists in every academic center, in colleges of nursing, colleges of medicine across the country. Why aren't we leading this concept of bringing biodesign and other teams into simulation to do discovery in a meaningful way, to allow them to really go deeper with their time and talent in academic environments? So that's my little soapbox today. I hope that kicks off a rich conversation with the panelists today about the power of academic collaborations. We're certainly honored to have members here from ISU, Bradley, and other our partners, and just really excited to see what happens next. So thank you.
you. That was a great opening because it just gives an example of the type of innovation that is happening in Illinois in the building that we're standing in right now, where we have systems and educational programs that are helping either students or community members have a place for discovery and then also have the tools and resources to take that discovery another step further. So thank you for laying the foundation. Everyone's gonna lick. Next up, we'll have Austin Green. Austin Green came to ISTC as an intern about 2 years ago through the University of Illinois Springfield's internship program. And at the beginning of this summer, we brought him on full time. Austin is incredibly passionate about data and policy. He has been the backbone of the Illinois Innovation Index for the past 2 years as an intern, and now we're so happy to have him full time. So Austin is really proud of this report. We're really proud of the report that he did, and today will be a sneak peek at all of the data, and then we're hoping to release it sometime next week in a nice glossy finish online, digitally. So Austin, please come on up. We're looking forward to hearing what you've learned.
Okay, thanks so much, Kate, and hello everyone again. Just wanted to say thank you, Kate, for the introduction as well, and then just kind of starting out for this report. I need to find my, here we go. Oh, wrong way. There we go. All right. So I'm often asked about Illinois' strengths whenever I'm advocating for a business to relocate here or for the innovation economy in the state. And one of the things that kind of gets odd looks is saying that Illinois is the place to locate a new small business in the Midwest. We constantly talk about the technology-enabled programming, workforce development across the state, a diverse and strong workforce, and each of these are hallmarks of the Illinois economy. And this report is a dive into the strength of that innovation ecosystem. We look at university-supported startups that have been founded over the last 5 academic years, and we do this through the collection of our University Entrepreneurship Survey. We partner with 12 institutions of higher learning to get information about founders, about funding and funding sources, and also look at SPIR and ICOR, two very impactful programs in the state to drive innovation forward and support entrepreneurs. And so one of the things that we often get asked is, what are we looking at? What's the population of startups that are in our data set? These are student and faculty-founded startups from these universities. We don't include alumni-founded startups as many other data sources do. We're intending to kind of focus on that industry and academic collaboration that occurs on our incredible institutions of higher learning campuses. So for this year's University Entrepreneurship Index, when we're looking at the industries, and each one of the industries that we code by are included in this graphic, you'll see that about a quarter, a little bit more than a quarter of our startups are within the healthcare space. So that's wearables, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and as well as a number of other different types of healthcare related startups. Also important within this graphic is the 11% that you see for retail and wholesale goods. E-commerce sites are a fast growing sector within our data set. We see that in the 2018 University Entrepreneurship Index report, we were reporting about 5% of our startups were in e-commerce. That's now 11%. So that reflects a change in the type of young people that are emerging out of systems of higher learning and faculty as well, where we're looking to have a more responsive and more adaptable market for commercial goods. So when we're looking at these university-supported startups, these startups are job creators, they're sector catalyzers, they're bringing new products and services to the floor to be considered as viable business strategies. And in order to be a viable business, you need to be able to employ strong, hardworking people, and Illinois is a great place for that. We see that the average startup in our data set is able to employ about three individuals, and those active startups in our data set that we mentioned before, about 433 active startups, they employ on average about 3.7 individuals. And so That leads to a total amount of job creation of about 2,093 for these startups that have been created over the last 5 academic years. Of those, about 60%, a little bit under 60%, remain active. That's that 1,164 you see on the far right of this chart here. Looking in startup funding, which is another one of those variables that we were talking about at the beginning that we collect, there is, of course, that significant pathway that we talked about for non-tech transfer startups versus tech transfer startups. More than 3/4 of our total amount of funding that we see here, $804 million, goes to those tech transfer startups. And we've seen funding mostly stagnate for those tech transfer startups when comparing to past years. However, for non-tech transfer startups, that funding has in some ways subsided, kind of coinciding with the onset of the pandemic, but we do believe that there's other factors that contribute to this potential lull. SBIR funding shortfalls are one area that have potentially impacted university-supported startups. In the 2020 University Entrepreneurship Index, we reported that about 4% of total funding came from those SBIR pathways. That's down to 2% in this year's report, which we can contribute partially to a slowing economic climate as well as SBIR political battles that have occurred over the last 2 years. And that funding by industry, again, whenever we break down by industry, biomedical and biotechnology startups do lead the way here. They acquire funding at about 3 times the rate of every other industry combined. And again, that's mostly due to those high costs to research at the very beginning of a tech transfer or biotech startup's lifetime. And when we look at these funding pathways, this is a really good look into how the funding in many ways has subsided due to larger trends. Each one of these sectors has seen uniform lulls in startup funding over the last several years. The only startup on here that has seen an increase in funding compared to last year's University Entrepreneurship Index is our materials sciences startups. And these do fluctuate pretty significantly from year to year, given the presence of 1 or 2 major companies that have been able to generate a Seed A or Seed B round that is significantly larger than the rest of the data set. So there is some standard deviation year over year. Important to the university system and approach that we utilize in our University Entrepreneurship Index is showcasing just how many of these academic startups are able to generate funding in external sources, venture capital funding, private equity, other types of external funding. University pitch competitions are increasingly popping up all over the state. In fact, we've included a new university in this year's data set, Loyola University, and we have Bethany with us, who was a participant in their pitch competition in 2022. These pitch competitions oftentimes have prizes that are awarded to participants in those competitions, and we see that that has been able to generate about $10 million in funding for our startups in the data set, and those startups that have been able to attract university funding have been able to receive a follow-on amount of just under $100 million. And so we're seeing a 10-to-1 ratio that these startups are able to generate follow-on funding after they've received a university award. More than 40% of the startups in our data set have received some type of direct university funding award, and like I said, that has amounted to just under $10 million. This graphic is showcasing 2 of those impact programming that we discussed a little bit earlier. The SBIR program is a federally run program which 1.2% of a agency at the federal level, 1 or 2.2% of their extramural research budget must be allocated towards small business innovation research, which is the name of the grant itself. That includes grants being made by the Department of Defense, the NIH, as well as a number of other important federal agencies like the Department of Energy. The I-Corps program is a state-administered program, public-private partnership, that is managed at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, that is focused on making sure that faculty and researchers are able to commercialize their products and services after research in the lab. This is a team-based approach that has been utilized in the state for well over 15 years now. And we see that both of these programs are having an impact in the state of Illinois. 72% of I-Corps participants remain active, which is higher than our general population, 65%, and higher also than the general population as well in the activity within Illinois. So 90% of those I-Corps participants stay in the state if they remain active. SBIR, we have a similar situation arising there. 88% of SBIR recipients in the state of Illinois in our data set have remained active compared to the general population, and just 83% of those SBIR recipients have stayed in the state as well. And then additionally, we do look at this in county numbers as well. So 76 of our startups have participated in I-Corps. 24 startups have received some type of SBIR allocation, which is slightly down from past years. Now, when we look at, we do ask 2 questions of our university partners each year about demographics. So the 2 questions that we ask are, was this startup founded by a woman or a co-founder? Was this startup founded by a foreign-born founder or a foreign-born co-founder? Those 2 questions don't receive responses on every single startup that we ask for data on, but we do have an estimate available to us here based off of this population that does respond. 40% of the university-supported startups in our data set feature a woman as a founder or co-founder, which is a near record, and then 48%, which is a record, featured a foreign-born founder or co-founder. So extremely exciting that there is this large push for diversity at universities that seems to be having some returns in terms of foreign-born founders and women founders. We would like to build this out in the future, but for now, this is the demographic questions that we ask, and these startups that are kind of in this realm that are women founded or founded by an immigrant are more likely to remain active than the general population of startups in our data set. Now, this is not Harvey. This is the Association of University Technology Managers. They produce a survey each year that goes out to technology transfer offices all across the nation. And when looking at these numbers for Illinois, you can see Illinois remains a foundational part of Midwestern innovation and manufacturing. 736 invention disclosures this past year in their most recent survey release, and 256 patents. So this is fairly consistent with past years. However, we have fallen in these national rankings outside of the top 10 for the first time on those 2 elements. In licenses and options agreements, we've consistently been around the 11th to 15th rank over the last several years, and that stays consistent year over year. These 2 other measures, invention disclosures and patents, do seem to have some pretty wide standard deviation and fluctuation year over year, and so we could anticipate the return of Illinois into the top 10, perhaps in the coming year. And then this is the amount of licensing revenue that's been generated by universities in the state. This is also acquired from the Association of University Technology Managers and their survey to technology transfer offices. As we can see that the 5-year amount does fluctuate pretty widely, and there has been a decrease, but this is related more so to jackpot licenses, which are large million-dollar accruing royalties that universities are able to get with larger companies. And so that is a pretty rare phenomenon in Illinois, and that is part of the reason that we see that kind of dropping from 2019 to 2020. This is a new graphic for this year. We wanted to explore this, the change in Illinois licensing revenue over time. However, the massive standard deviation between year over year sometimes makes for this comparison not to look a little bit more threatening than it really is. Licensing revenue, again, is that when a university executes a license and option agreement with a company and are able to generate rolling returns on that company's revenue. So for the overall Illinois Innovation Index report this year, some of the strengths that we think that this data showcases is the representation and success of women and foreign-born founders within Illinois, which is a testament to the state's university systems for prioritizing diversity and equity. We also have record investments from the federal government within two major programs that are going to benefit researchers and entrepreneurs, particularly faculty at universities, with the CHIPS and Science Act, as well as the Regional Innovation Hubs program. Regional Innovation Hubs received a $500 million allocation this past year in order to catalyze the amount of research that's occurring in already existing STEM hubs throughout the United States and transforming them into really sector-dominant manufacturing. Those recipients of competition awards. The follow-on funding ratio for them remains strong year over year, and the 10-to-1 ratio that we see this year, while slightly lower than years past, is an incredible testament to the work that's being done on university campuses to promote entrepreneurship. And then some of the more kind of challenges that have come along with this year's data set is that dip in non-tech transfer startup funding. Those are predominantly student-founded organizations. That dip, we think, is related partially to the onset of the pandemic, but also potentially some cooling in the economy overall. There's also been a drop in the number of startups, as we saw with that first graphic comparing 2014 to 2018 to this last 5-year period. The looming government shutdown is also potentially a challenge that can be encountered by people that are applying for SBIR applications right now, but also for the numerous NOFOs that are going out related to innovation hubs and other federal programs. Without a functioning federal government, there will not be those application processes and NOFOs released due to the realities of what a government shutdown would look like for those three-letter agencies, for those multiple federal agencies. And then within venture capital, we discussed a little bit about overall funding slowdowns. Venture capital, according to Carta's report from March of 2023, is cooling down as well. We saw about a 58% decrease in the amount of venture capital deals between March of 2022 and March of 2023. These are related to other macroeconomic trends that aren't directly related to university-supported startups. However, we don't believe that university-supported startups are completely insulated from some of those macroeconomic headwinds. Looking forward, there is a lot to be excited about within Illinois, particularly within state policy. There's two programs here that we mentioned that are within the report itself that we kind of give a lot of limelight to as well. The SBIR Matching Funds Program received funding for fiscal year 2023, which will be managed through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. It gives SBIR applicants from Illinois the opportunity to have more budgeting flexibility and be able to improve their competitiveness whenever applying for these competitive grants. And then the Illinois Innovation Vouchers Program is a system whereby the Illinois state government is enabling collaborative research between faculty researchers and businesses within the state by offering a voucher for the participation in that research. So the upfront costs that a business may have to encounter when considering the opportunity for collaborative research could be offset by this voucher program. And additionally, Illinois Science and Technology Coalition remains a firm supporter of the Startup Visa program, which is something that has been implemented in several other countries, the United Kingdom and Canada being two of them, to retain and also support the immigration of foreign-born entrepreneurs who, as this data showcases, are more likely to remain active in the state and also more likely to generate funding for their startup. We see that retaining these immigrant founders is extremely important, and that opening up those pathways and making them more accessible to more entrepreneurs is extremely important. All right, and I do want to extend a thank you to our university partners from throughout the state for their participation in this survey. We would not be able to produce this data without each of these partners, and I am very thankful for each of them as they assist in this process every year. And Loyola being the new arrival, we also appreciate them being part of our survey for the first time. And I do want to go ahead and make an introduction to our panel conversationalists that are going to be talking about all things Central Illinois, resources for Central Illinois entrepreneurs. First off, I think we'll go ahead and introduce our moderator for the panel. Our moderator for this evening is Dr. Mayuri Conway-Datoan. And Dr. Datoan is a Bradley University Executive Director for the Turner School of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. She has returned to Bradley in 2023 after a career in consulting work prior to, as well as research as a faculty member. Mary is a 2022 UN Women Rise and Raise Others Award nominee and a Fulbright Garcia Robles Award recipient. She holds numerous board seats and is also a leader in the Global Links Initiative, which is a public-private partnership to empower women through education and design thinking. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Datoan. Take a seat on the far left there, I think would probably be the best option as we kick off the panel. Next on the panel is Christy Dula. Christy is currently leading the Office of Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Technology at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Prior to joining the Department of Commerce, Christy was a launch team member and vice president of events for 1871, the Chicagoland's flagship entrepreneurial resource center. Christy's focus is on connecting entrepreneurs to the resources they need to launch and expand in Illinois, and we are so thrilled to have her here. Thanks, Christy.
Make me clap.
Mike, you're next. So Mike Stubbs is the director of the Peoria Next Innovation Center, and which is located just down the road from us here at OSF. And Peoria Next has helped create over 1,200 jobs in Illinois and Central Illinois, and has played an essential role in launching high-growth startups like natural fiber welding and Endotronics, both of which I believe are alumni of this University Entrepreneurship Collection. In addition to leading Peoria Next, Mike also helps companies manage their technology portfolios, and we're extremely excited to have Mike on the panel. And I have two more intros to make, so next we'll go with Andrew Yee. Andrew is a MI-trained visionary system builder and strategic thinker. He is currently serving as the director of the Office of Innovation and Startups at the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council. Andrew is a longtime TBED practitioner, and he has a proven record of catalyzing human-centered movements that spur innovation. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. And last but certainly not least is Doug Pruitt, and Doug is the newest director of the Distillery Labs here in Peoria, and is also a longtime serial entrepreneur himself. He has founded or helped launch and scale more than 15 startups over the course of his career. Additionally, Doug has worked in senior roles in business development, strategy, and operations for corporations ranging in size from 5 to 20,000 employees. Doug received his undergraduate degree in agricultural communications and education from the University of Illinois, and he received his MBA in healthcare management from Western Governors University. Welcome, Doug. Go ahead and let you guys kick it off. Mary, if you want to lead in with our first question, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate doing all those introductions. Took a lot of pressure off me. So as the moderator, this is the easiest job in the room. The only thing I need help with is timekeeping, because I realize the only thing between you and lunch is us. Right? So let's talk about some things. We set more questions probably than we have time for, but we're going to talk on 4 key areas. So I want to start with this first area, and I think it's a great follow on, Mike. I'm going to start with you. Because we heard some great examples of what's happening here in Peoria and in Central Illinois. But you have been maybe quoted or paraphrased as saying Peoria and Central Illinois and the Asian community is Illinois' best kept secret. What do you mean by that?
Sure, so it depends on kind of the lens of who you're thinking about, right? But if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to figure out where do I locate to launch my business, what is this, opportunity and where do we go? A lot of people think about Silicon Valley or Boston or Chicago or other areas in which they can go from just a trend perspective or what they see in the news or what are in the headlines. But as far as the resources that are available to run startups, whether you need research lab space or you need funding or you need great researchers or the training simulations that we have here at Jump Training Center, the way in which you can actually locate here in Central Illinois and have an entrepreneurial ecosystem and community that's supportive is different than you would find other places, right? So in Central Illinois, if we need to then talk to somebody from, approvals for rights of way or funding or marketing or other experts, everybody's just kind of a call away. And as you see on this panel, it's really easy to get connected with the right person, because if you don't know, you know the person who then knows, right? In addition to that, from a cost perspective, having those research spaces here, you're able to reduce your cash burn substantially. And so if you're receiving funding, you're always looking almost at the next funding if you're not receiving revenue yet, right? So those early years are a huge risk. So how do we reduce that risk? And a lot of that is from an expense perspective, being able to find a place that not only can you get the resources, but you're not burning through that cash so quickly. You're allowed to do so much more from an innovation perspective on the budget you have before then looking at what's that next funding round, which allows you to then focus specifically on the technology they're working on. I think another way of thinking about it too, which I talk about a lot, is a lot of our entrepreneurs come out of different industries. And so here from a medical perspective or a manufacturing perspective or universities, there are people that the reason why they're becoming an entrepreneur is because they believe their product or their service is going to change the industry. If they didn't, they wouldn't then become an entrepreneur and lead a startup in Central Illinois, because the risks and the barriers are larger. So for example, from a funding perspective, there isn't a venture capital firm in Peoria. Now we can get you connected with venture capital firms across the state and outside the state and other places, but because of that, nobody's uncle can introduce you to the person, right, who then can get you the funding. And so there isn't the same sort of brand in a way of people saying, well, I want to be a startup entrepreneur, right? I want to be a tech founder just because I like the sound of it, right? Here, if you do that, it won't survive very long. And so the people that are actually doing the hard work of starting startups are really doing it because they truly believe that they have found a solution for a very hard problem. And if you look at the success rate of the startups here in Peoria or Central Illinois in general, versus if you're looking at Chicago or St. Louis or Minneapolis or even others, that success rate as a percentage is a lot higher. And I think the reason for that is because if you are truly committed to it, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it also allows you to do that in a way to make the most out of the resources you have. So it's kind of a long answer, but people don't think about Central Illinois as this birthplace of innovation. But if you think about farmers, they were our true first innovators, right? And we are in the middle of farmland. And then when you had manufacturing, and Caterpillar is a worldwide brand name that started here, right? And now we're getting into healthcare, and we've got quaternary care that's coming in, and we've got all of these great institutes. We've got a Research One institution with University of Illinois College of Medicine in Peoria. We've got Bradley doing great things from a partnership perspective, and now OSF is figuring out, okay, now we can bring ISU in, Illinois State University, and we can bring in, University of Illinois Chicago, and these other areas in University of Illinois and Champaign to then develop that and continue on the momentum that's here. And so it's really just, these events are great to get that story out so we become less of a secret, right? And more of like, oh, we should really look at Central Illinois if we're looking to launch business.
Wow, thanks. You've given us a lot to deal with and to think about. So I want to turn to the other panelists, and Christine, I'm going to start with you, which is closest to me. Is clearly nobody wants to be the best kept secret, right? We want to get out there and let folks know. So I'm going to ask each of you to think through, okay, what do we do with that challenge? How do we move past this challenge of being a best kept secret? What would you suggest? Maybe 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest thing is one of my favorite things about Illinois and businesses and founders is this humble, roll up your sleeves, get it done kind of culture that we have. It's interesting because I feel like on the coasts, you see a lot more marketing of themselves. The founders market themselves a lot more, whereas here in the Midwest, I feel like tend to kind of keep head down and like move forward there. And I don't say that to say we need to change the founders. I say that to say that our marketing approach, in my mind, needs to fit our culture here. And I think one way that we can really do better with that and overcome that challenge is we need to be telling the stories for these entrepreneurs, right? They can still remain humble, they can still focus on their company and everything else. But I think it's important that we are spending a lot more time and effort highlighting those for them, which then makes the Midwest a lot more attractive, right? But still allows the culture to stay the same. So I think marketing is probably the biggest thing to me. I feel like that was a long-winded answer, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
take up
it's
my
good.
2 or 3.
That's excellent. And as a marketer, of course, I love it when everyone says marketing is the
Yeah.
answer. So that's very good. And I think you're reminding me that at the Turner School, we talk a lot about collaboration. And certainly, as Mike is describing the area here in Central Illinois, and you're saying the nature of some of the entrepreneurs that are coming from here, it is a very collaborative approach rather than a heroic approach of look at me and how great I am, but look at my team and look at these collaboration skills and who I can collaborate with. So that's really wonderful and a good storytelling line for us. Andrew, what are you thinking? Top 2 ideas here?
I think, I want to just go back to Christy's point about people. Right? The people is probably one of the secret sauces because, of course, because of the collaborative nature, but ultimately because of the willingness to actually try to work together, regardless of the differences. Right? We're able to put aside our personal differences and to be able to align and to move forward in the future. One of the things I've been saying for a while now is what I've heard when I first came here was everybody please stay in your lane. But why stay in your lane if we're going into the future together? So I flipped it on its side and say, hey, this is a 1,000-layer cake. Right? A beautiful piece of pastry. We're moving forward into the future, but we're moving in cohesive and converging fashion as opposed to staying in your own lane. Right? The other part about it is also about the, Christy also talked about culture. And culture is the unwritten rules when nobody else sees, or nobody else is around. And ultimately, this is a culture that we're building and incubating here, a radically inclusive culture, one that by default, people already have been invited. You don't have to ask for permission to attend any function or any sort of event here. That's really at the heart of what we're trying to do. Perhaps not so secret sauce.
I love that visual of flipping the lanes to a cake.
Yeah.
I just think who doesn't love baklava? Right? Layers of that great integration that's all hit through. That's a great visual. Thank you. Andrew, Doug, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone's saying, and it's hard to put a hard and fast solution on how to get that out there. But agreeing with what everyone else has said, but to add something maybe a little bit different is also thinking of the environment more as we need to be make sure we're more porous, so that it's free flowing. So ideas and people and resources, and make sure there's less friction or resistance for an entrepreneur or a mentor in this geographic area to then go to Bloomington or to go to U of I or up to Chicago, and through that with the free flow of movement, that's whenever the word gets around there, and it's I don't want to compare it to something usually a negative connotation, but it's an infection. So we're talking about what we have here in Central Illinois. We have great access to all the types of capital, but it starts with being able to get outside of this bubble and create those connections and relationships throughout the region, the state, and beyond.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So, Doug talked about the infection, but it's really virality and network effect. Right? It's the idea that
Virality and
network effect.
network effects.
Right? Is the ability to have that porous nature of the network.
Yeah.
The flexibility of the architecture by which we can actually say, hey, you should show up. You should just tag along. You should, let me introduce you to somebody. Let me introduce you to Mike, Christy, or whoever else. And that ultimately will build that community, right? The radically inclusive community of hey, come on over. That's not necessary. And so this brings to a point. The fragmentation that you see in larger cities is not as noticeable because it's covered up by the population. Whereas here the fragmentation is more visible. But if you look at the percentage shift, it's actually very similar. But at the same time, what we're trying to do is to create similar communities at scale and to engage in a way that's authentic and is true, that really makes sense for each and every person, not just the entrepreneur, but also the small business owner, the creative, the professional, those exploring entrepreneurship as a career students.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking is our students, whether at Bradley or the other universities that we've heard about, the 12 universities that contribute to the data, right? That openness, that radical inclusivity, right? The porousness of that is what enables a student to see a possibility, whatever level that student is at, even K through 12 or higher ed. I think that's really important. So we've got a lot of great things going on here at the same time. And Doug and Mike, I'm going to look at you for a little bit. One of the other things we heard about the data is some of the macroeconomic climate is also impacting entrepreneurs. Can you think about some entrepreneurs that you're dealing with in your organizations, whether Peoria Next or Distillery Labs, and how that's influencing some of their decisions, some of their activities? We'll start with you, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. Everyone's feeling impacts, and it's some of the unknowns that come with that, and that may be the topic we'll talk about later. And then fear enters. So when you're making decisions from a place of fear or uncertainty, you kind of constrict. Mm-hmm. So a lot of bootstrapping, a lot of postponing, maybe some. All right, we were going to iterate and do a phase 3, but that's going to necessitate substantial capital, or we were going to enter into a new market. So I'd say right now, currently, there's, this is all anecdotally, but I feel that there's a tap of the brakes for sure, but still doing a lot of work on that back end so that we're not going to lose momentum. We're just going to slow down a little bit and then try to position ourselves. And this is what we all do as mentors, is we feel like you have to keep the momentum. Now, we might change what that word means or what level of momentum or rate of momentum we have. So that's kind of what we're seeing here at Distillery Labs. I'm sure Mike, you have some other things.
Yeah, I'd say it's dependent on the stage of the company, right? So the ones that have already raised that are looking for bigger rounds feel an impact. But the people that come in day to day that are looking at how do we raise money if it's not bootstrapping, right? Because again, going back to the idea that they have this idea that this product or service is going to work and it's solving this problem, we're doing it no matter what, right? So they're at the early stages where they don't feel that macro at the same amount because usually that very early pre-seed funding is hyper-local. And the people here themselves are trying to support entrepreneurs in the area. And so if you're getting a local investment from local people that are trying to help local startups, it doesn't have that same impact as if you've already had a few rounds and you can't raise what's here. You need other funding to then come into Central Illinois to grow your business. That's where those larger companies in those larger rounds are going to feel more of an impact. But the companies in general earlier on that we see a lot as far as a higher percentage, maybe they're thinking about it in the future, but right now they're just focused on getting this first thing done and getting what they need to continue moving down the path. So it's a little insulated in that way, depending on what stage of the company it is.
Awesome. I'm going to have one more question in this kind of area. Christy, I'm going to look to you because, as was mentioned, right, if I think of Central Illinois, not just Peoria, but Central Illinois, we're also tapping a lot of rural America. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you can think about rural communities and their resilience to these macroeconomic shocks or trends, and just help us see outside of the city of Peoria what you're observing in the rural communities.
Yeah, I think there is a wonderful collaborative nature, right? And then this culture that's kind of built on everyone looking out for each other and having each other's backs. So I think when you do see some of these economic downturns, you see a lot of the communities shopping more local or like working with more local companies, right? So I think that's something that's really beautiful about kind of more rural communities. And I grew up in a rural community, so like I love it, and that nature is very different. I think for me, Chicago is very collaborative. There's a lot of people, everything's built up instead of out, and that collaborative nature is at a speed that I don't want to say it's not accounting for intentionality, but it's different when you can sit down with someone and spend a couple hours having an in-depth conversation. Thank you for that last time. But having an in-depth conversation versus like I've got an hour block meeting and we've got to cover X, Y, and Z in it, right? There's just a different nature and culture, I think, that's really great about it. And also some of the industries that are really covered in rural communities are the most resilient, right? And oftentimes these times the cost of living is a lot more affordable in rural communities too. I think there's a multitude of different reasons why rural Illinois or central Illinois.
Great. Yeah, and that resiliency, right, around, as you said, our farmers are some of our initial innovators, and
Yeah.
so they have generations of this resiliency and that spending time to do those things.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit and think about the data that we just heard about. So I want to, of course, start with something near and dear to our heart at Bradley and at the Turner School, and that's this idea of student startups. So I'm going to remind us of a statistic here and read it for a moment if I can. The data from the ISTC suggested that student startups receiving a prize for a pitch competition. Past elections, that group, pitch award winners, captured about 6.5% in follow-up funding, right? This last academic year, that was closer to just less than 2% of the original university prize amount. When you hear those sort of data, are there anything that you're thinking as a, why that fall? What might have changed? And Andrew, I'm going to start with you if you've got any thoughts here. If not, feel free to pass to Mike.
Yeah, so, I think we talked about founders. At the heart of it, is always a challenge as to, because there are multiple areas of focus. So do you find funding from paying customers, or do you search both competitions? What is your focus, right? So ultimately, you can go chase funding, or you can look for paying customers to actually find your product market fit. So perhaps that could be one issue as it relates to funding from that aspect. There could be a number of other things. They could be focusing on the schoolwork as opposed to, hey, I want to do both and do both well, because ultimately there's a runway that you have to hit for the academic career as well. So
Yeah, it's a good point. Where is the student in their academic career? Is some of that. And we talked about the macroeconomic tendencies. Mike, do you want to pick up any thoughts here?
well, I would say kind of to add on that from Andrew's perspective as well, if you're funding startups that then have customers, there's less follow-up funding, right? So it depends on also just year to year, what does that look like? So even though the number might have gone down, it might not necessarily mean that those companies that were funded were less successful. The other thing is the more funding you get early on in the area, the longer the runway, which means the later probably the follow-on funding comes. And so if we've got different gaps of when this funding occurred with different students, we might see later on that trend comes back in for that initial cohort, depending on where they fall in within that 5-year gap. So it's a data point, but I don't know if necessarily it's the data point from a success metric perspective.
As I was listening to, I was thinking about that. One of the things we talk a lot about, it's a data point, but it's a data trend.
Right.
So let's not panic about a data point. Let's look at the trend, see where that's going. Always ask why, but don't panic about a point, right? Look for that trend and some of the factors that you all are mentioning. Christy, I want to ask you kind of a follow-up that's related to that. And it talks about sort of the liquidity of the market. Do you think there's other shocks present that might cause a fall, in other words, a continuation of this trend? Or do you think there's some things that are on the horizon that might change that data point to a different trend?
I would like to say that I think it can change for the better, that we're looking at a positive uptick here. And I think there's a variety of variables, but I would say from the government perspective, you're seeing there was a ton of, still is, federal funding coming through, right, to pass through to states, to then pass through to our innovation networks and our businesses throughout. So I think government recognizes the challenges at this time and is showing up with funding to help fill in some gaps in certain areas. And it's designed in different ways. So one example being the venture capital program, which is $114 million that Illinois is rolling out right now. The website is live at the moment because we're having intake for any startups who are interested in flagging that they are going to be fundraising this year. Please do. You can Google DCEO Invent, and the website information is up there. But that is designed in a very different way than a private VC fund, right? With a private VC fund, what they care about is that return on investment because it's dollars and that's their job, right? That's what they do. And not to say that Illinois doesn't care about the return on investment, because great returns mean that we can then reinvest in other startups too. But the design of the program coming from the U.S. Department of Treasury is around success being tied to the amount of follow-on funding we see. So for every investment that we make in a business, out the gate, we have to have at least a one-to-one match with a private investor, leverage private dollars, and then over the course of the entirety of the program, Treasury is looking for a 10-to-1. So it's used differently. The funds are used differently, and helping. I know we just talked about follow-on funding, right? Like it's designed in a way that helps to fill in kind of those gaps.
It's kind of yes and, right, approach.
Love
together.
improv. Oh,
Yeah.
Pub is about it.
Doug, I want to come back to you. We talked a little bit about some of those student startups, but I wanted to ask you to think about non-student startups because I know Distillery Lab is open to both of those. Are you seeing some similar funding differences, challenges, less liquidity in the capital market? Just give us a sense of what you're seeing there.
Yeah, I'd say, a little bit of everything. For us here locally, I think there's an opportunity to maybe educate some of those with the capital, some private funding on the new opportunities, what they present, what to expect on, a return. Because there's a very conservative point of view of, I want low risk, high reward. Well, that's smart, but there's also other great technologies that are just emerging. If you're not up to date on kind of what that opportunity is, and if we can unlock it and capitalize it, the exponential value that could have for other startups in the area, I think is super important. So, we're seeing a little bit of a headwind, I guess, or a slight barrier for those non-student startups trying to get access to some of that. But more private capital and angel investing. In the last 2 or 3 days, I think I've been in 2 or 3 meetings where we're learning about all these new government funding opportunities and existing ones, new ones, and I think that it's that education. So how can we get that out there so it's an accurate but consistent message that just keeps driving it home that this region, this state, we're here to support you. We just need to have a conversation to figure out what it is you as an entrepreneur need and want, and then let's figure out what works best for you.
Could I say that you're connecting a little bit back to what Christy said in terms of the marketing, whether it's the marketing of this region called Central Illinois, or whether it's the marketing and education, so helping to market these startups to the potential investors so that they understand both the risk and the potential reward, and that each of those might have different timelines. I love that you're using education and marketing together. So I want to talk about one other thing that is actually a real passion space for me, and that's looking at the diversity of some of the funding. So we heard this statistic from the ISTC's University Entrepreneurship Report. 40% of startups feature women. I'm going to ask each of you to think about this. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. There you are. Right, very excited about this. Each of you to speak about initiatives your organizations are doing to pursue and advance equity, how these changes can permeate the STEM or the STEAM areas. And Chrissy, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll just go straight down and make a circle back around.
Yeah, so I will say for us, it kind of starts with program design. Obviously, outreach for all of our programs and making sure there's equitable outreach, but at the core of it, program design is key. And for me, always making sure that we have diverse people at the table when we are designing programs is really key. And one example of that, I will say, is with this new venture capital program. So there's U.S. Department of Treasury has set certain guidelines for us and certain goals for investing in diverse founders, investing in entrepreneurs in CDFI areas, in rural communities throughout our states, right? So part of that's embedded into the program already. Then I threw in a lot more layers of making sure that we had higher goals, and also are really making a push for that outreach. But in the design, one thing that we rolled out, and you'll see it on the website, is a submission, like an expression of interest form. Hey, I'm going to fundraise this year, because fundraising is so relationship based currently, right? If you don't get in the room with these investors, then it's very hard for you to even be on a radar. So I wanted to be sure that we were cutting through that barrier to entry. And so now we can kind of solicit feedback from entrepreneurs all over the state, right? And then on top of that, so the SSBCI programs encompass $354 million that came through for loan programs, and 114 of that is for the venture program. But we also have an allocation coming from U.S. Department of Treasury that's $6.8 million to do SSBCI TA outreach, how to apply for these loans. And on the venture side, built out that the TA portion of it to be sure, in alignment with the submission form, you'll see it asks, have you ever created a pitch deck? Have you ever pitched to investors? And so now we're going to be able to utilize some of these funds for technical assistance to then have this warmly outreach, and we can see in different communities. We're seeing here in Central Illinois, there are all these entrepreneurs who have never created a pitch deck or never pitched to investors. Then this is the 1871 hackathon hat on my hat. Is we're going to set up pitch deck clinics throughout the state where hackathon type style events, but we will have mentors that can actually assist these entrepreneurs with creating a pitch deck, and then they can pitch to investors and get feedback. So I think that for me, diversity, it means that we've got to think about all the different facets that bring us to where we are or haven't allowed some people to get to certain places, and then account for all those small things in program design. It was a long-winded answer, sorry, but that's a lot in there.
Right?
Yeah, so from a QA Next perspective, one of our tenants that comes to mind is Rain Construction, which is run by Bridget Booker, who was the first Black woman in her ironworking union before she left and started her own construction company. So we've always been open to then minority-owned and women-owned founded companies. What's been the shift is that what's great is the city and the county in different areas are trying to figure out ways in which to support entrepreneurship throughout the area, right? So the city of Peoria had RISE grants that then spread the idea of not only could you create a startup or a small business, but you could actually get grant funding for that as a for-profit institution to get you off the ground and running. And then the county's partnered with the Smart Start dashboard, which allows then anybody to come in and receive mentors, so connections with people on this panel, those sorts of connections open the doors to people understand like, oh, this is a space that I'm invited to and can come into, kind of what Andrew was explaining earlier. And so through those activities, more people have felt open and invited to the space to then find resources and also figured out where the door is to open it to then get help. And so over the 2 years I've been at Peoria Next, minority-owned founded businesses have increased from 2 to 7. And so that is a substantial increase, not because I've targeted specifically minority-owned business messaging or programs, but just through these types of collaborative environments and open understanding to the community, that people who are entrepreneurs will then find those resources to then come and use those services.
Very good, very good.
So for the GPDC, it's we have a mandate for the entire region, 5-county region. And so it's not just about the city, it's not just about the tri-county area, but larger than that. And so at the heart of it is continuing to keep your ear open. So like in August, we had a listening session to hear what people specifically who are interested in entrepreneurship, exploring entrepreneurship, just launched a business, what do they need, right? And so it's rural, it's urban, and it's a crossover in between. And so at the heart of it, what we're listening for is what they're sharing with us, but also we're trying to also understand the barriers that are inherent in this process of early stage startup. And so understanding the barriers, understanding the behavioral aspects of that, because until robots take over, we're all people, we are just human behaviors. And so designing for that change to happen, designing for beneficial change to happen, that will take time, but it's also understanding what part of that journey is to change.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, from Distillery Labs, some of you may have heard this kind of metaphor I've used in the past, but while I was at U of I majored in agriculture. One of the classes I really enjoyed was rural sociology. And I don't remember the details, but something along the lines of, it was in the 50s or 60s, so somewhere in there, the community feel of small towns began to dwindle because people stopped building front porches and built back decks instead. So what we talk about for Distillery Labs is we're going to have, it's a community space. We're right there downtown, Adams Street. You come in, it's open. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you want to do. If you're just curious about entrepreneurship or you're a seasoned entrepreneur, we want you to come in. So it's that default. You are invited, you are accepted. You don't have to wait for an invitation or an event. You come there and we want to talk to you. And I think that is a great way to collect the diversity that is represented in our community and beyond. And what we see, a lot, like, so for instance, I know, immigrant was high on the list. Is that population, for them to come to America to get reestablished, in my opinion, for an entrepreneur, one of the two most important things are passion and perseverance. You have to have a passion to drive you forward, and you have to have the perseverance. So whenever you hit your head on a wall going 60 miles an hour, you get back up and you go through or you go around. You have to have that perseverance. And what we're seeing is, if you come to this country, and to this city, and to this region, and you're curious about entrepreneurship, I think that they're already poised. And so we're seeing a lot of, back to the momentum, like hard and fast, like their momentum is like a rocket going out, and they're staying at it, they're persevering.
Can I answer that?
Okay.
Just to build on that, so I'm first generation immigrant, right? I had to overcome all these different barriers to even come here, right? So by overcoming all those barriers, that has already set me up to overcome more barriers, right? And to get to a point whereby, hey, I need to keep banging my head against the wall until it breaks.
You say it's coming out, Christy?
Yeah, and I think one challenge, and I'm flagging this for the room, I'm sure some have run into it already, and if you haven't, just something to be mindful of, is following Supreme Court's decision regarding tying eligibility to demographics or anything along these lines. When it goes back to program design, There have been some challenges legally at looking how we're putting that out there. So I would encourage anyone who may be running into those with their own programs, ensure that there's nothing holding us back from collecting the data on the demographics. And on the back end, we can see where we're falling short, where we need more outreach, where we can be really intentional about it, even if we can't outrightly be extremely intentional about diversity and equity in our programs. Just a thought.
I actually want to stay for one more moment on this diversity and go back to that. You mentioned the foreign-born, the difference in some of the funding that we saw in the data. And I wonder, Christy, if you see any connection there or have any thoughts around, I believe that the governor has a centerpiece in the state's economic vision in terms of international cooperation. See any thoughts or share any thoughts around connections there?
Yeah, there's a lot of connections throughout, like on our larger corporation side and on our small business side. We actually do have currently a program, iStep. I'm not sure if some in the room are familiar with it, but we have an Office of International Trade and Investment at DCEO, and they provide a multitude of various programs to help our companies when it comes to international trade and exporting. And actually, out of my shop, we have our International Trade Centers, which I know Bradley University also has one too. There are a lot of efforts to get our Illinois businesses engaged at an international level. We are working through, always open to ideas. Happy to pitch initiatives if we can get those through on really how we can be even more supportive for immigrant entrepreneurs, keep them here and help them to grow their companies. It's great for the economy. Obviously, we saw, the output with women-owned businesses and immigrant businesses and great economic value, right?
And I just have to do a little plug because you mentioned Bradley Small Business Development Center, and I would say the award winner, right? Some of us were at the event yesterday, so we were graced with actually another Bradley alum who came back from DC. And speaking of diversity, the first Filipino American applied, the first Filipina who received the nomination from the president for this position and awarded the Bradley Small Business Development Center the best in the state, including the international trade. So all out to Jim Foley and his friend. So we could clearly go on all day, but we don't have all day. And so I just want to ask each of you if you just would like to leave the room and our online guests with a kind of final thought around innovation, entrepreneurship, Central Illinois. Let's go with that. Andrew, I'm going to start with you, and we'll come back around this way.
So I was just sending yesterday somebody an email. Entrepreneurship is a team sport. It really is. A lot of people think about the entrepreneurship success pie as the idea being the biggest piece. It really is, and it's a team sport. It's about the market. It's about the execution, and finding the right people to make things happen for you.
And you can find your team here.
Of course.
Here we are. Doug?
I would say kind of a twofold thing. So one, to reiterate, how many wonderful resources we have here, not just Peoria, but the whole Central Illinois region. And so if you're an entrepreneur, you're invited. The invitation's there. The doors are open. So just reach out, and then we're going to do our best to connect you with the right resources that you need for where you are in your journey at that time. But if you're not willing to take that first step, that's all you have to do. That's a 2-sentence email, and you send it out to one of us. And here's where you need to go talk. That we encourage you to take that first step, because that means now you get to take the second step, and then you get the third. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to shift the mindset, and I think it's our responsibility to help lead by example and show that it's okay to be afraid and it's okay to fail. That because success isn't final, failure isn't fatal. It's encouraged to continue that matters. So if you're an entrepreneur, continue. Take the first step if you've not done that. Take the second one if you've taken the first one. Just keep moving.
Okay. Excellent. Christy.
I would say just, we are here to help, and help. Sometimes that comes in the form of grants or incentives. But I encourage anyone in the room to be thinking of, the reason I brought up program design is because that is made possible by everyone in this room, right? So the ideas, the thoughts that come to our mind, the things you're hearing from entrepreneurs that maybe we're not hearing directly, that's how we build programs that really are supported. So we're here to help. Always happy to come to Peoria, come to Central Illinois. Just know that we're here.
I think you're saying interesting things. Andrew talked earlier about listening, starting with a listening tour. And the only way we can do listening tours if anyone actually invites us in, right?
Yeah.
So we are reaching out because we want to have that authentic listening experience. And that means the audience, whether it's in the room or online, they have to open the doors for us to be able to listen. So that radical inclusivity is a two-way door, right? It's a rotating door. That's one way. So very, very good. Mike?
I think when we look at the report that came out, you have to make kind of the cutoff somewhere, right? But to think about how all of the university supports entrepreneurship in ways that are also outside of the report, right? So we talked about the ONA-SBDC and the International Trade Centers and others. So Bradley has an ONA-SBDC, but other universities across the state also do. All of the good work that they're doing for all of the companies from the community aren't included in this report because what we're looking at here are students and faculty, right? And so thinking about that impact, in addition, is really broad. You know, so when I think about Central Illinois in general, even Bradley, we don't have a research institution where we can fill the Peoria Next Innovation Center, right? And so most of Peoria Next Innovation Center aren't students or faculty members, in which case a lot of the support that Bradley's doing, right, won't be seen in this report, but is also in addition to, right? So the report's great, it's excellent, it's showing where the trends are, it's showing where our students and our professors doing across the state, it's highlighting different areas in which Central Illinois is exceeding in those areas. But to also keep in mind that the impact of those universities also goes beyond what's there. And so in addition to doing the listening side of getting people in and starting those conversations and moving, we can also prove that we're really actionable in getting people going to where they need to go. And so I want to highlight, one of those being NFW that's here. They've now raised over $162 million, right? You're able to do that here in Central Illinois. And last December, they won an award from the Intellectual Property Owners Association, which is an international trade group of over 125 companies, which includes Caterpillar and Johnson & Johnson and 3M, and all of these large name brand companies that you know. And so each year, that IPO Education Foundation selects one company globally, or actually one individual or a group of individuals for Inventor of the Year. And 2 years ago, I went to BioNTech for the mRNA technology for the COVID vaccines. And this most recent reward went to Natural Fire Welding in Peoria for their platform technology that's removing plastics from the environment and apparel and automotive and other areas from a material science perspective. So that's just one example of what we're doing here. But just to keep in mind that all of this impact is huge. And if we can start and focus on our local companies here with investment or support or discussions or connections, there's really ways in which they can go far. And so I just wanted to make sure that we didn't highlight too much of the availability, but also some of that success. As you've mentioned, we're not great at marketing ourselves because everybody locally in the room sort of knows these stories.
Yeah.
But how do we get them out farther and known kind of across communities?
Excellent. The ecosystem is vibrant and important. That's great. Well, I know we have some lunch, so we have some time for those of us in the room to continue the conversation over that, but please join me in saying thank you to this very esteemed panel for sharing their ideas.